All right, so welcome to the project of our group entitled A Proposal to Improve the Rural Telephony Project. So these are the members of our group as listed below. This is the content of our project. We would start with an introduction, identify the problem, talk a bit about the Rural Telephony Project, the challenges it faced, and the criticisms. We'll also mention our proposal, our proposed methodology, the financial strategy that we'll use, and we'll conclude. So let's start. So the category that we chose for our project was in the telecommunication field. And we decided to focus on the rural telephony projects because they were mentioning how they want to bridge the digital divide between rural areas and urban areas in Ghana. It was initiated by MTN Ghana and the Ghana Fund for Electronic Communications, GFEC. So this proposal, we made our own proposal and we'll introduce it later on how we improved their solution. So what was the reason for the Ghana Telephony Project in the rural telephony project in the first place? So we know that about 70 million users in Ghana, mobile users in Ghana, have access to internet, but that leaves about 40% of the population who lack internet access. We also know that 30% of the population in Ghana live in rural areas. That means an overwhelming majority of rural areas do not have access to the internet. So that was the whole reason for the rural telephony project. And this problem is significant because there's a study that says that we lose about $1.2 billion every year as a result of the lack of broadband access. And this was done by research done by the African Development Bank. So it's a very significant issue. MTN Ghana and the Ghana Investment Fund for Electronic Communications came about the Rural Telephony Project in November 2020. And the scope of the project is to connect 2016 rural sites with internet. That covers about 3 million people. And this project was supposed to end in 2023, but has been extended to 2025. The funding for this project was provided by the China Exim Bank, which gave the project a loan of $165 million. This figure gives us an idea of how much money must go into the project, and we would later on factor in this these figures into our own personal budgets for the improvement of the project. So it's important to know the technology that MTN relied on to achieve its aim. And these two are highlighted, the UMTS 900 Rural Star technology, as well as the reuse of old equipment from urban sites. So the UMTS is a wireless communication device, as in it relies on signals received wirelessly, microwave links, to produce voice and data services. And MTN relies on this in other countries as well. It's not only in Ghana. We have them being used in Kenya, and I think I'm not really sure, but I think Nigeria as well. So they use these in rural areas specifically because of the low consumption it uses. It uses solar panels, so it doesn't rely on a national grid to generate the signals that it needs. So the other point which I want us to focus on, because it's going to become important just about a few minutes from now, is the reuse of old equipment. MTN's aim is to reduce carbon waste or e-waste, but this may seem as if it's just the reason that they give on face value. In actual fact, they are using old equipment from urban sites because they want to reduce cost. It's expensive to manufacture new materials just for some rural sites, which may or may not use the products the services that you're offering. So yes, it might, so far, it's all well and good. We know that, so the map here is meant to show us how many of the sites are being constructed at the moment. So all 2016 sites are under construction as of now in all regions in Ghana. We have about 1,000 rural sites already connected in Ghana, and we have 1.5 million people benefiting from this project. These regions have these villages listed as being beneficiaries. We have Hani, Adamu, Fomo 1, and Sabiye in the Brangafo region, etc. So we'll go on to talk a bit about the challenges they faced. So it goes without saying that every project has its own challenges, and these are the few that we identified. They are geographical barriers, infrastructure limitations, and economic feasibility. And we are not saying that MTN has not attempted to solve these problems. In fact, if you look at their solutions, it seems that they had these challenges in mind. We have geographical barriers. So obviously they wanted to use satellites and wireless communication to get over the fact that you can't use a wired link everywhere you go. And also the power supply issue is solved by the SMTP, the Star wireless device that they use, which is solar powered. And also the economic feasibility aspect has been mentioned already, that it's not very feasible to go into rural areas and expect to make a profit. So instead of using modern equipment, they reuse it from the old sites. There have been some criticisms, however, and one main criticism is the lack of the knowledge to use these internet resources by the women in the rural communities. It's in the culture of many rural areas that women have no business using IT. So even if these internet resources are provided, they are not going to be used to their fullest potential. And one minor criticism also is the disregard for people with accessibility issues. That means they have one form of disability or the other. And MTN has addressed these issues, okay, indirectly, because the Cybersecurity Authority is not explicit that they are working hand in hand with MTN in conducting the rural telephony projects, but they carry out IT training programs for women in rural regions, and MTN sort of acknowledges them, and it was worthwhile to mention it. So in our proposal, we would actually state that it should be included in the projects, that you are going to educate the people in the rural areas to use, in knowing how to use IT equipment. So JFEC also has a training program for people living with disabilities, and they're working hand in hand with the German Developmental Agency. So that leads us straight to our own proposal. We struggled to come up with a better proposal than MTN because it seemed airtight at first, but we have to keep in mind that MTN have themselves stated that they are reusing old equipment from the urban areas because they wanted to reduce carbon emission, as they claim. However, this solution of theirs, or the means to their solution, brings about another problem, which is, in the long term, we would not have high-speed internet connectivity in these rural areas because the reuse of old equipment, it quickly fades out. They are using 2G, 3G technology, which is currently so far back that most applications on the internet do not rely on it at all. So we'll have unreliable network coverage, which hinders the ability to access online services. So our proposal is to use high-speed internet connectivity connections, which is the use of fiber optic cables. So our name of our project will be the Rural Fiber Project, also focusing on the same 2016 rural sites. That will be our scope, and it will be moving on from 2023 to 2028. So the use of fiber optics would generate a lot of opportunities in education, health, and other sectors as well. So overall, if it was feasible, which it is, it would be overwhelmingly better to use fiber optic than using the wireless connections that they are so used to using, the current model that they are using. Our methodology will be DevOps, which is a fairly recent methodology. And you could propose that it's an improvement on the Agile methodology, which is more software oriented. DevOps more or less combines infrastructure operations as well as the software aspect of operations. So it's about flexibility and also about teamwork, and it relies on quick time feedback. And the reason why I'm choosing this instead of a rigid methodology like waterfall is because this project is unpredictable. You don't know what is going to happen from one side to the other. So we need to have that kind of flexible system that we can quickly adapt to. Okay, so the project charter here summarizes in detail everything that we try to want to accomplish. As you can see, it has the names of the members, the stakeholders, and the scope, as well as other details. And that leads us to our financial strategy. So in the reports that we made, we detailed how we came about with these figures. But for now, since this is a summary, we would highlight the table and the total that we would need. So our figure, considering everything, including women empowerment, would be $216 million approximately, which is not far off from the figure that we saw in the China Exim Bank. So we know that MTN, from MTN's financial statement, we could see that they made about $881 million in 2022, which was contributed by their 31 million subscribers. So a rough estimate would give us about 81 million per 3 million people. And we are going to base this figure on the assumption that all 3 million people would be using the resources provided by MTN at its fullest potential. So the figures might be off by a few million, but for the purposes of our calculation, it might not make that much of a difference. So another statement that we must be aware of is that for the last 10 years, MTN has been having a revenue growth of about 10%. So assuming that this growth continues at the same rate, the next 5 years would see an increase in that 81 million that they got from the 3 million people to at least $117 million in year 5. So with these figures in mind, we can go ahead and calculate our NPV as well as our payback period to determine our payback period. So we know that from the calculations on the screen right now, we know that the NPV would be $149 million, which is an indication that the project could go on. And one thing I didn't mention is the reason why the figures go so ridiculously high is because it's not because fiber optic is more expensive, but the installation of fiber optic is overwhelmingly more expensive than other means of communication. You can see here that internal and external wiring would consist of about $4 million, but installation in itself is about 180 million. And this is because we were using aerial installation, which is relatively cheaper than digging trenches actually. So I would leave the technical aspects out for now just to focus on the raw figures. So our payback period will also be 2 years and 5 months based on the table shown. We know that we'll be fully paying back our initial investment somewhere around year 3. So that's not making about 50 million in cumulative cash flow. So that's all we have to say. We will just conclude by saying that the rural telephony project is very airtight, and given what MTN is doing, is very commendable, but it could be better if they consider our proposal to use fiber optics instead. So that would be all for this video and this presentation. So thank you.